Hey everybody, what's up? It's Booksy. Today is Monday, October 9th. Today we're going to be talking about AMC stock. Just a quick update, a little bit of a recap, talk about maybe the expectations from here. So the last video that I did was about downside, and I should say potential downside because that's what we talked about. And I said, there's some things that are kind of uncertain about it, and we hadn't quite broken down yet, but that I was feeling like the setup itself was something we'd seen before that wasn't exactly great. And I gave two scenarios. One was downside, and I really just talked about the main beginning steps of downside that might occur if we broke beneath that 793 level and then hooked. And you can see I brought up a similar comparison on how it was navigating. Did look pretty bearish with the massive upthrust that we had, but I also said that if it managed to come back above that day, it had to be that day. I said if it managed to come back above this 788, 793 and find support, we should see it push up and then head to the upside. And thankfully, that's exactly the path that it took. So you can see that during that day, it did break down. It did come back beneath here. It didn't hook though. When it came back up, it actually pressed back up above. It did this very quick LPS at the top here and then pushed up and did another, I'm going to call it like a little local SOS at the top of this range, as you can see right here. And then of course, the rest is history, right? I didn't actually do any other update videos. So Thursday and Friday, I was spending most of my time on Discord and talking about each of these moves as they happened. From that point forward, I had estimated that we would get somewhere between 9:30 and 9:45 on Monday. We opened the day right in that pocket, and we stayed pretty much right in that little zone. And the reason I had that as a target was because of, this is the recap part, right? Was because of this S-curve. And what I identified was that, hey, if the bullish situation here pans out and we do end up coming to the upside, and this was like the very next day after talking about potential downside, I said, this would be roughly where that first S-curve is. And you can see it's a really clean little 50-50 S-curve. And what I gleaned from this is that, hey, this is an expansive fractal sequence. So it was shrinking, which means that if it blows to the upside here and breaks out and jumps the creek, you might see something similar, if not exactly the same, right, to the upside here. And this was the actual measurement that I used. And I used, I think, 815 as the center. And so my upper target was $9.45 for this S-curve. And then the reason I'm talking about that, not just because that target hit, which is great, but because as it's been moving up, it's also been checking every creek. So you can see every time it's pushed above, you can see this anterior upward push here on the creek. I'm going to use this orange line for a minute. It's pushed above, formed a new top, pushed resistance. It's successfully done this all the way up. So every time it's pushed high, it's gone above the previous resistance here, just to the left, and then it came back down and checked the creek. We've had some pretty ridiculously deep and steep pullbacks. For example, these massive upthrusts that then come all the way back down on retrace. It's been a bit weird, but on the whole, we're seeing those M shapes escalate. They're going to the upside. And I mentioned that the big difference between the breakdown and the breakout here was that you have a breakdown occurs when that final M sequence rejects to the downside. You can think about it like a fan going down, those bearish creeks. Whereas it's basically identical, except that it's going upward, and you're essentially creating that last M cross going to the upside. I talked a lot about in the Discord over the last few days how this is your master fractal sequence. This is ripped right from the master fractal right here. The one that I use, it's a big S-curve, it's a big M, and then within it there's like an M on the top, an M on the bottom, an M on the right side, and then on the right side specifically you get that shrinking motion, and all it is essentially like this exact same version of that we're seeing right now. We just haven't seen them in a long time. We haven't had these kind of moves we're so used to and conditioned, unfortunately, myself, conditioned for that downside that I expect almost every time that this is going to be some ridiculously deep move and then potentially, a hook right there. And then it's essentially just turns into this bearish version, right? And what's going on right now is that what's happening is we're breaking down at this last part. We're getting this low M shape, right? This little mini M, and we're pushing back up. And what it looks like is it looks almost like these inverted head and shoulder motions back to the upside. You can kind of see it here on that. And that's very bullish. Like, we just haven't seen something like that in a long time. We're seeing that right now on the breakouts. It looks pretty good. I was looking for it to have a pretty big retrace coming up today. It just didn't push down below 9. The high that I had was about $9 for that pullback. The low was about $8.80. It's about as far down as we could go. And it just has to do with creek levels and where we found buyers and sellers at different points. So a little bit off for sure. But it did break again today back to the upside. Here's this exact same chart, basically looking at it from a slightly different point of view. So here's your downward creeks, that fan. Each one's kind of pushing over, right? And at this point, we've now come above the top, which is that 908. We didn't have a deep retrace back down to this previous creek. Instead, we kind of stayed pretty light on our feet. We just dipped slightly, below the previous high here, the buying climax over here, or their auto reaction, I guess you could say, since that's kind of what it was. And we found support, and then we pushed up again. I do think that at this point, if you're talking about like deep retraces, it may or may not make sense right now. We may need to kind of exhaust RSI on like the 4 hour before we come back down. I think it's pretty likely. I have it drawn out here. You can see that M cross, and this is what I was just talking about a minute ago. Here it is, going to the upside. And it's just pushing, AMC's in a really, really nice bull run right now. And so we're just kind of waiting to see where it hits resistance. There's a few places that I have in mind. We'll talk about that in a minute. But honestly, like tomorrow into Wednesday, if we don't see that pullback, I think there probably could be some of the biggest days that we have on this run, because I think once we get back up to perhaps 13, maybe ends up being a little bit lower, like 1075. We're going to have to talk about that because that's the bottom of that range. Those are the two key spots that I think we might get stuck on, but I think we're going to get some pretty big moves, possibly, by midweek this week. And then that might be about it before we have a cool off period. We've done some sufficient testing on this bottom creek. This top creek, I'd say we really haven't. It's possible that sometime in the future we may come back down to this area just around 9. I don't want to come back down there. I don't think it's 100% necessary, but it's just something to keep in mind. If we pass over liquidity pretty quickly, sometimes we may end up coming back there in the future. So we'll see. This is kind of like the main S-curve right here, as you can see it. I have it drawn out, here as well. Same deal. You see that cross trend. In this case, I have the trend drawn a little bit lower because I'm trying to see like where is it finding buyers, like buy, sell a little bit, then buy and sell around it, and then now it's sell, right? Sell, and then again buy, and now we're pushing off to the upside. I think this is a good one to use because if you notice, there is like a bottom trend here, and you can see like this one's slightly off. I've got it drawn on this chart a little bit more accurately. So we'll use this one. And this bottom trend had these parallels are running through it. And I think this is basically like the wide upward channel that we may respect. It can be thought of as kind of like upward momentum creeks almost. Like if you jump over this middle, which we did today, and find support above 983, you could kind of guess like, well, you may end up coming the full width of this channel, right? This could be a channel beginning right here. From September 14th down to September 28th. So as a result, this could end up greatly defining kind of like the movement as the days go on. And you can see like, as the crow flies in kind of a straight line up, even if we went a little bit parabolic, that could lead us all the way back up to middle of the range here around 1170. And then presumably we're right at the gap. So it's possible we could go ahead and see that gap fill. We may have to pull back and then go up first, which would be something like this, where maybe you get to the top here and you distribute, you come back down along midpoint here, or even lower into a spring zone, an area where we don't have a lot of liquidity. So we might jump this, spend some time here, and then push up again to get to that gap fill. I think that's very possible. I don't necessarily think we have to go straight up here. I know it looks like we would need to, possibly because of the way it came down, just the outward trajectory being really similar. Could be, but I don't think that's necessarily what happens here, because we do have a couple downward creeks. We just jumped over, you can see these parallels coming down. They go way back. So I've been looking at these quite a bit over the last few days, and I think these are pretty strong. And I know that until you sort of meet them again and sort of test them again, that's kind of maybe we could call it like speculative. But I imagine that if we do form a push up and we maybe get to this gap area, and we fail to like reclaim the full gap, we might see that pull back and then push up, and then kind of creates that inverted head and shoulder. And a lot of times what you'll notice is on that kind of inverted head and shoulder, you often have that cross creek that creates a really simple support, right? So it's jumping over it and then coming back down and testing it. So that being said, it would also make sense then that we might face some rejection along that creek before we jump it. And I think it's a likely scenario here, which is I've got the markers already laid out. One of them's at 975, which we kind of pushed above into close today. That's kind of the middle point. You can see I have a steeper trend here. Notice I'm doing this very iterative-like. So like this is like the lower iteration. It's very steep. This is the larger one. It's much larger. This guy right here, it just pushed back over the middle. So again, I think it could come all the way back up to 1077 or so. Really, it lines up almost perfectly with this bottom intersection, and then also that creek coming down. And so it would make some sense to me to go ahead and come up here, check the channel line, as it were. We haven't checked it in a while. This would be like only the second time we've really touched it. And I think the same will apply back here as well once we reach this one again. I was just talking about that a second ago. And then let's say again, maybe it's similar to what we're expecting on the big picture. You come back down to, let's say, the 50. And you can see there's a low liquidity right around 1030. Maybe that's roughly where that happens. And then you get that push out, right? And I think this seems likely to me because, again, you're getting these kind of J hooks to the upside, and so those M shapes. We need a little bit of cool off. Been talking about on the lower time frames, it's not really confusing to me anyways, is that you got this really strong divergence going on. We're making higher highs, and RSI has been kind of like slowing down quite a bit all the way up to the 30-minute time frame. Now, normally I'm kind of like, whatever, we've seen this kind of stuff happen on a lot of market moves, and it never really, doesn't really matter on low time frames. And I generally agree that's typically how I'd go about it. But to me, it's a bit more compelling because to me, it looks like the volume has to some degree also come down. I know it's been very consistent, so I don't want to say like it's definitely dropping. That's not the way it seems, but just at a glance, it seems to me like there might be a depletion in volume. I think tomorrow and the next day are going to be big indicators. We may not see any depletion. We may see a huge increase now that we've found support here and pushed up. We may see a huge increase in volume. But for now, it's a little bit sketchy because, again, you've got this really strong divergence, bearish divergence on RSI. And then if you go to the 1 hour, it's already pretty pretty overbought. I'm not super concerned about this because AMC can often stay overbought for several days before it has any kind of correction. And it may have a correction that's pretty mild and then still go back up again. When you get to higher time frames like the 4 hour, RSI isn't overcooked yet. A lot of times right when it crosses this like 50 is when you see like kind of the biggest moves happen. We're right in that moment right now, and you can see that historically during some of the biggest moves, I marked them off in orange. Right when it crosses that 50s, when you're getting that big push, and it can still go pretty far. So this is like way back. This is March, right? And you might think that 50 cross happens late in the move. It doesn't actually. It happens really early in the move. And the rest of it, see right here, it's like right before it breaks out, it hits that 50, and then it runs and it gets over bought pretty fast. By the time it's about halfway up the move, it's overbought. So we've got some headroom here, like there's a lot of space, and that's why I'm not super concerned about those lower time frame bearish divergences. There's just so much room here to navigate. I will say this though, that anytime I see that, I kind of expect there to be some kind of an LPS, or, maybe it's an SOS range, a support, right? Coming back down and finding support. So again, I don't think it's out of the question that we might see something like this going into the end of the week, where you get a more substantial pullback either Tuesday or Wednesday. I think Tuesday and or Wednesday could be some of your bigger days, but it wouldn't surprise me to see one more big pullback and then have this thing push up pretty hard. And then maybe we see it start slowing down. This is all speculative in terms of timing, and a lot of it just has to do with big picture stuff. How I'm seeing a possibility of this like kind of widening outward, maybe widening the channel a little bit, breaking out of this channel right to the upside, just like I think this one would need to. But again, speculative. We're not there yet. Really more interested in seeing what happens at 1070 and then 1170. And those are kind of the next two levels that are up on the docket. I think that a lot of the market right now, or excuse me, a lot of the volume right now is definitely bullish. There's a lot of calls being bought. My biggest thing right now, the thing that I'm walking through, every day, is just kind of watching those pullbacks and making sure that it's still making higher lows, making sure that you don't see something clearly distributive. You got to keep an eye on it to some degree, and we didn't really see anything like that today, so we're in pretty good shape. I think with this push over 9 something, if it holds 970 tomorrow morning, I think you're going to see another big push, and I really don't see us stopping until 1077. So it's a pretty big $1 move. That's what it looks like to me. And if it comes back down for some reason, it really just needs to hold above 945 roughly. It needs to kind of do a little SOS and then move back up. If it breaks down after that, the creeks are pretty steep. There's not a lot to look for, unfortunately, for support back down until 910. So we're going to have to kind of play it by ear at that point. The mornings have been particularly volatile on AMC, so just be careful. Make sure you're careful with your entries. Watch for those breakouts. Somewhat predictable, somewhat difficult to kind of gauge timing-wise. Today's took quite a while, almost till midday. Whereas previously we've had some pretty big drops that almost immediately recover. So just keep your head about you, and everything should work out okay, I think. Going back up towards 13. There's not much to say really when you're in an uptrend, thankfully. And we really had a good breakout. Everything kind of checked the boxes that it needed to, right when it needed to. Immediately, when we said, hey, this has to happen, and it happened. So at this point, I think we're going to see like one more big push. I'm hoping we get it up to here, and then I think we're going to have possibly a much bigger pullback, just to kind of chill out the lower time frames. But I don't think it's going to be like the end all be all. I don't think it's going to completely reverse the stock or something like that at this point. I don't think we're going to see that until much later, but I would not be surprised at all to see like a pretty decent pullback, and then one big one once we get back up near this gap fill area. Whether it fills the gap or not doesn't matter. It could be before or after, but I think there needs to be a pretty decent one, and it may end up abiding by what we see here. It may not. So that's what I've got for you tonight. I hope you guys have a great week. And I will be pretty active on the Discord. All right. Bye-bye.